Good. Have you been getting out and enjoying our fall days? We've got fall days. Can you believe it? I'm so happy. I thought we kind of went from summer right into winter. So, I hope you're getting out there and just enjoying the beauty of this time. Okay, so we are continuing today to talk about a book written by Douglas Abrams called The Book of Joy, and it features the Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who is a Christian, and His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who is a Buddhist. And so we've been talking about 8 obstacles to joy and the 8 pillars to joy. And, in really sitting with this information, I feel like the bottom line so much of the time comes down to embracing that we are one humanity, and that everything really comes down to being able to remember that and living from that consciousness that we are each other and that we are here to be with and for each other. For me, that's really what this kind of boils down to. Now, last week we talked about 2 of the obstacles to joy. One was sadness and grief, and the other was despair. And we were reminded how important it is for us to recognize that we're just bombarded with all the negative stuff because that's the sensationalism. But there is so much more good that goes on in the world, and that people are inherently good, and that we have that opportunity to remember that, and again, to live from that. We also talked about the pillars of joy, which were acceptance and humor. Acceptance being that we look at what is happening in life today, and we accept that that is what is, not from a place of resignation, but from a place of empowerment, because there's so many potentialities and possibilities that lie in that moment. We also talked about the power of humor and how important it is for us to laugh at ourselves, to lighten up, and to recognize that when we can laugh at ourselves, that is a shared humanity. Because don't we all do like silly, goofy things at times? Anybody here not ever do silly, goofy things? And when we share those things, it just brings that shared humanity around to us. So today we're going to start by talking about 2 obstacles to joy. And the first one we're going to talk about is loneliness. Now, I believe that there are a lot of people in our world that are lonely. And, I think about especially like in our culture, our elderly people. I don't believe that we treat our elders the way that we should be treating our elders. And there's a lot of elderly people that are in their homes that have no one to come and see them. They may not have a vehicle. A lot of them that are in nursing homes that don't have families, and so we can only imagine the loneliness of that experience. I think about the loneliness of people who are on the streets, who are homeless, people who deal with depression or anxiety, people who are very shy or introverted, and people have really low self-esteem. There tends to be an isolation in that. And one of the things that the Dalai Lama talks about this is that in many of these cases, what happens is that the focus becomes only on ourselves. And that's a dangerous place for us to be when our focus is only on ourselves. The Dalai Lama said that he had gone to a conference of medical scientists years ago, and one of the medical scientists said that people who are disproportionately use the first-person pronouns, I, me, my, mine, are more susceptible to heart attacks. And he said the scientist didn't say why, but the Dalai Lama said it just seemed true to him, and I'll share more about that in a minute. But he said this is really a deep insight for us, because too much narrow focus is not good for us, because that narrow focus, any problems that arise in that become, again, just way beyond what they need to be. He also shares that when we isolate ourselves, we tend to move into a distrust of other people. And he says, and guess what, you guys? We're here with each other. We need each other. We're not intended to do life alone, that we're intended to be here and to really get that we are one humanity that we are here to be here for and with each other. So he says the antidote to loneliness is to start becoming concerned with the well-being of other people. And that when we start to think outside of ourselves and we start to look at other people and we want to be a part of helping them to feel better, that it creates an open-heartedness and a warm-heartedness. Now, there was another study done that showed that when people are lonely, when they're feeling that isolation and that loneliness, they seek something warm. So they seek something like a hot bowl of soup, and that literally makes them feel better. So the whole idea being, what both the Dalai Lama and the Archbishop are saying is that we can generate that warmth simply by looking outside of ourselves, simply by showing up for other people. And that when we have, and you know, when you think about it, it does make sense what it said in the beginning, that when you are so closed down, you know, it closes down your heart. But when we're more connected and we're open-hearted, it opens up. It just opens up all that energy. So that's the antidote to loneliness. Okay, second obstacle to joy: envy, comparison, and jealousy. Anybody ever experience any of those three things ever? Yeah? No? Ever? So the Dalai Lama, oh no, I'm sorry, it was the Archbishop. I love this. He says, it's not that you wake up in the morning and you think, now I'm going to be envious. He says it just rises spontaneously. And the Archbishop is really about not beating ourselves up for our very normal human emotions, that it's okay that we feel this way, where the Dalai Lama feels a little bit different. And I love both of their perspectives. But because I'm always one to say, we have natural human emotions, don't beat yourself up when they show up, but we don't want to live there. You know, we don't want to stay there. So he says, I mean, you get up and you're trying to be a good person, and that guy goes past yet again for the third time this week in his new Mercedes Benz or some other very nice car. You've been trying not to feel jealous each time he passes with his car, but the feeling just comes up. And I think that's just honoring our very normal human tendency. Comparison is just part of our humanity, until we wake up and start to become aware and work on it. There's a Tibetan Buddhist teaching that says what causes suffering in life is in a general pattern of how we relate to others. Envy toward the above, competitiveness towards the equal, and contempt towards the lower. And when you really look at this, it's interesting to look in your own beingness and think about this. Is there envy towards what you would consider those being above you? We live in a culture that is about competition. You know, I've got to get mine, and there's not enough to go around. And then do we ever look at people and, you know, people that are homeless on the street and say, you know, they just need to get a job. We have contempt. So it's important to look at that in our own beingness, because that's a very kind of a cultural thing to see happening around us. So the Archbishop and Desmond Tutu, like I said, they feel a little differently about this, where the Archbishop is all about just it's okay, whatever you feel is okay. The Dalai Lama is a little bit different. The Dalai Lama says, so I think from my viewpoint, my spiritual brother's explanation is wonderful, wonderful. And if you've seen the Dalai Lama, you can see him saying this. He's always got that smile on his face. He's just got this great energy. And he says, you see, at the moment that jealousy or envy develops, you can no longer maintain your peace of mind. So jealousy actually destroys your peace of mind. And as we know, jealousy can destroy relationships, right? Okay, so where he goes with this is he says it's important to cultivate any emotion that brings joyfulness and peace of mind, any emotion that will disturb this initial rising of this envy or this jealousy. We want to bring immediately into that. We want to be awake and aware enough to go, oh, hold on a second, this is not the road I want to go down. So what is some joyful emotion that I can put in there to shift it? And ultimately, you know, what he's saying is that if we do our practices, if we do our work, we're not going to be as easily triggered. And so we're not going to have to think about not beating ourselves up for the natural human emotion because we've done our work enough that we're not going to be triggered so easily. And he goes on to say that it's most important, and here it is again, to develop a sense of well-being for other people, for the well-being of everyone around us, with kindness and compassion. And so again, it comes down to spiritual practice, practice, practice. So I want to explain what I mean when I say this. So for me, a spiritual practice is that I want to go beyond my ego. To me, my ego is my conditioned mind pattern based on all my life experience. I want to go beyond that because I believe what's beyond my ego is my reality, my greater reality. So I do spiritual practices so that I can reveal and open myself up to the reality of who I and what I really am. So prayer, meditation, reading, listening to podcasts, writing, contemplation, things like that. But it's not enough for me to do that spiritual practice if I leave it right there. I need to take my practice into practice in my life. And so what that means is that I have to make the commitment to myself that I am going to be awake and aware as I move throughout my day. And when I get triggered by things, because you guys, we're gonna get triggered. Is that true? Yes, we get triggered. When I get triggered by things, because I've had this foundation and I've been keeping this in the forefront of my consciousness, I am going to come back so much quicker to my center. And I'm going to be able to see it for what it is instead of going down the rabbit hole. You ever go down the rabbit hole? It's painful, isn't it? Like if you're in envy or jealousy, like I know the last time I felt that jealousy, I felt like something was gripping my heart space. And I did not want to feel that. And honestly, it wasn't until I fully came back present to this person right here and said, oh, I wonder what's going on in here, that jealousy is even coming up. So it really, again, always comes back to us, right? So practice, practice, practice. Okay. The antidote to envy and jealousy and comparison is the next pillar of gratitude, and that's it, of joy, and that is gratitude. And we're going to talk more about gratitude at the end of the month, so we're not going to go into it a lot today, but I'm going to tell you that most spiritual practices celebrate gratitude as one of the most powerful things that we can be focused on. In our lives. How many of us have a practice of gratitude where we write our gratitudes down? Yeah. Or we talk about them, or we just stay in that consciousness. It's life-changing, isn't it? It changes your life. I mean, it changes your life because it's that powerful. And I love this. It's not happiness or joy that makes us grateful. It's the gratitude that makes us happy and joyful. Gratitude is so incredibly powerful. So there was a study, U.S. Davis professor Robert Emmons had been studying gratitude for over a decade. And what he found was that people who are grateful do not seem to ignore or deny the negative aspects of life. And I think that's important. That goes back to acceptance. But what they do is they simply choose to appreciate what is positive as well. They simply choose where their focus is going to be. And you guys, we can choose that. And there may be a choiceless choice in there for a little while where we're just triggered and we're in the muck, but ultimately we do have that choice to focus on how blessed we are. We are so blessed. How many of us woke up in a warm house this morning? How many of us ate breakfast? Drove here, walked, we are blessed beyond measure. And it is so important that we begin focusing on how blessed we are and how grateful we are for all that our lives are, for all our friends and our family, everything around us, because we are abundantly, abundantly blessed. So I would like for you, if you would like, this was the Dalai Lama saying this, to repeat after me. I am fortunate to be alive. I have a precious human life, and I am not going to waste it. Amen. All right, so gratitude. So the last pillar of of joy is probably the easiest one for all of us, and that's forgiveness. Simple, easy. We talk about this a lot, how simple this journey of forgiveness is. And, and obviously it's not. There's so many layers to forgiveness. But, as I was really sitting and contemplating this, I think for me, we have this collective consciousness, and usually we believe there's this collective consciousness, this energy, and we are adding to this collective consciousness all the time. And we have to ask ourselves, what am I adding to all of this? And if we're in resentment, if we're in blame, if we're in victim mode, because if we're in victim mode, it's because of what somebody's done to us. If we're in that place, what are we adding to the collective energy? What are we adding to the collective consciousness? And now more than ever, this energy that we add needs to be pretty good, pure energy. Wouldn't you agree? It's so important that we're upholding this energy. So I want to share with you something that came to me that just makes sense to me. Because I was thinking about, to me, when I look at what's going on in our entire world right now, there's a lot of gray area energy. Would you agree? A lot of gray area energy where we're just sitting there and we're going, what the heck? And so I realized that what we have all created throughout decades is we've created this overall ego consciousness. And, from the, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, life was a little bit simpler way back in the sense that we weren't pulled by all of these outer things. And then, industrialization came around, businesses started booming, the economy got good, mostly. And we were able to start buying our own vehicles, we got to buy our own homes, TVs came along, and TVs started to tell us why the washing machine that we have isn't near as good as the washing machine that's on the commercial, and the car that we have isn't as good as the car that, and started pulling us to stuff and money and power and competitiveness and, this whole life that we have been living for so long that's been outer focused. So we created this overall ego of what that is. And the ego simply is trying to protect that because that's like its child. And so I believe what's been happening is that there have been a lot of people that have been waking up and saying, oh, hold on a second, this life isn't just about me. And it's not just about my, me, I, mine. It's about all of us. It's about this shared humanity. And that it's important that I do help take care of my neighbors, that they matter. And so this waking up has kind of pushed against this overall ego. This overall ego is going, oh, hold on here a second now, because this is what you told me made you feel safe, happy, and secure. And really, without even realizing it, because I think we are in the midst of a spiritual revolution, more and more people are waking up, and so that energy is getting stronger, and this overall ego is getting louder and a little bit crazier, and here's the thing, I'm a mom and a grandma. If somebody was threatening the life of my child or my grandchild, I would do anything to protect them. And I feel like that's this overall ego, is that we told it, this is your baby. This is what you need to take care of. This is what you need to protect. And it's doing its best to protect it. And for me, what that helps me with is it helps me to have compassion. It helps me to step back and go, oh, it's about fear. It's about fear of change, fear of something being different. And so I can have more compassion then rather than anger. Now hear me on this. It doesn't mean we don't continue to set boundaries, and it absolutely doesn't mean we don't continue to stand up for what we think is right, wherever you are. It is important to stand up for what you think is right, more now than ever. But really, you guys, what is more important than anything is that in the scripture it says, faith, hope, and love abide, but the greatest of these is love. That love never fails. That love is what ultimately wins. And as those of us who feel that, that we are waking up spiritually to this, we can't lose sight of the importance of that. We cannot lose sight of the importance of presencing love in the biggest ways that we possibly know how, because this is what's needed now more than ever, is the presencing of love. So I want to remind you about love in 1 Corinthians. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no records of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but it rejoices in the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, and always perseveres. Love never fails. There was no clause in there that said, except for this. Love never fails. So now more than ever, you guys, we are called to presence love in the biggest possible way that we can, wherever we are. Because love's going to win. That, I guarantee you, love is going to win. So in closing, do your spiritual practices. Practice, 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 practice. Be sure and focus on all that you are grateful for, because we are so blessed in our lives, and give yourself up to love. And I'm going to have us close with that affirmation one more time. So if you repeat after me, I am fortunate to be alive. I have a precious human life. And I am not going to waste it. And so it is. And namaste. Namaste.